Hi guys, my name's Jamie and this is my cat Biscuit, and we're going to talk to you about government regulation and indecency. Just kidding, he's probably not going to stick around for long, so it's going to be me. Alright, so let's start with government regulation. I'm going to start by giving you a brief history on how the Federal Communications Commissions kind of came about. So early commercial radio started off as a complete free-for-all. I think radio stations were able to talk about whatever they wanted. They were able to go on the air at any frequency with as much wattage as they wanted to use. And as the number of stations grew, a lot of static was created, and it was kind of chaotic. So Congress came in and they established the FCC, and this forced radio stations to acquire licensure. And this licensing would ensure that stations would operate in the best interest of the public. And people were a little bit skeptical and concerned about this. They thought that the government regulation on radio was going to limit free speech, and that meant that there was a violation of the First Amendment. And Congress sidestepped that. They had a rebuttal. They said that the airwaves are considered a public asset, kind of like a park. And since they are a public asset, they're subject to government regulation for the good of the public, which kind of goes back to the incitement standard. You know, you want to make sure that people on the radio station are not acting in a lawless manner. You want to make sure that they're not like raising potential for lawless action. It's really important. So I'm thinking about how relaxed the regulations have become over time. You know, it's really not that limiting if you think about what it used to be like when our parents and grandparents would watch TV and listen to the radio. The stuff was really, really wholesome, and except for the news. I don't know what the news was like, but entertainment-wise and like stuff they listened to on the radio and shows they watched, they were all pretty tame compared to what we have on TV now. So there's also the Federal Trade Commission, which was created by the government to regulate commercial speech. And in the beginning, the courts kind of thought that commercial speech and advertising was not worthy of First Amendment protection. At least they thought that it was less worthy of protection than political speech was. So that issue kind of came to a head during a libel case out of Alabama. The New York Times had carried a full-page advertisement to raise money for the civil rights cause, and the sponsors of this ad had some negative commentary about the police force in Alabama. So the question was, since this is an ad, is this considered commercial speech? Or, since they're talking about police force and this is a public issue, is this considered political speech? And ultimately, the court decided that the ad was political speech. So it was an ad and it was political speech. And this kind of opened the door for the First Amendment protection of advertising. And although the process of full protection for advertising is still a work in progress, the Federal Trade Commission still acts as a government regulating agency to enforce standards in advertising. I mean, apparently, false advertising is punishable, and so is advertising from which people can make the wrong inferences. So, with that being said, you know, it says that they regulate those kinds of things. There's really no government agency that makes sure that news reports are accurate or that opinions and commentary being shared are, you know, correct or they come from a legitimate source or anything like that. There's just nobody really regulating that. And it kind of, you know, this section concludes by saying that regulation of advertising remains uncertain on First Amendment grounds. So I think about the other day, I was looking through Cosmo magazine and they were saying that this particular mascara was the best mascara of 2018. And I was like, I'm running low on mascara. I suppose I'll give this a try. So I went and got it, and it's actually the worst mascara I've ever used. And I looked up reviews on it to see if, you know, maybe I just got a bad tube or something. Nope, other people think it's bad too. So I'm thinking it's pretty bad. And they probably paid Cosmo to advertise for them and say, this is the best, we'll give you a lot of money for it. And it's really not. So that's kind of false advertising. You're trying to get me to buy the product. It worked. It worked. I was a victim. So now I want to get into indecency. We first need to differentiate pornography and obscenity. So the government's, or the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that pornography, which is material aimed at sexual arousal, cannot be stopped. You know, we're all allowed to look at, or adults anyways, are all allowed to look at it, and, you know, I really don't know why. But we're all allowed to look at it, and that can't be stopped. And import and postal restrictions, however, can still be employed against obscene materials. So what we need to differentiate is how pornography is different from obscenity. And the court said that government can restrict sexually explicit mass media content if the answer is yes to all of the following questions. And there's some questions listed there. And I think the first two, you know, it says, is the material devoid of serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value? I think that question can be a little subjective. I mean, say you have somebody that enjoys pornography and, you know, doesn't want it to be viewed as obscene. They could kind of manipulate somebody into thinking, you know, that prop use was really artistic, or the script that was written for that adult film was really creative and it was just an awesome literary performance. You know, that could happen. But ultimately you have to be able to answer yes to all of the questions that they have provided. So although the Supreme Court has found that the First Amendment protects access for adults to pornography, the court has stated numerous times that children must be protected from sexually explicit material. And I agree, we need to keep children innocent as long as we possibly can. Congress created the laws to keep smut away from children who use the internet or TV. I mean, anything. They just, we need to regulate their access. Anyways, although hardly anyone defends giving kids access to indecent material, the law has two flaws. It's really difficult to define indecency. It's kind of a subjective, opinionated thing. What I think is indecent, somebody else might see as, no, that's fine, it's fine. But, you know, that's why it's really hard for them to define it. And then there's also, it's impossible to deny questionable material to children without restricting freedom of access for adults. And then there was also the Philadelphia Federal Appeals Court that reviewed the Communications Decency Act, and witnesses from the Justice Department had testified, and they said that the law went way too far because the laws required them to prosecute for certain AIDS information, museum exhibits, and there was a cover of Demi Moore on the cover of Vanity Fair. She was posed naked and she was pregnant. So one of my questions to you guys is, if you were in the grocery store with your child or your hypothetical child, and you saw, or they saw a woman naked on the cover of a magazine, would this be upsetting to you? Do you think that that would be considered indecency? I would really like to know what you guys think about that. So the court said that enforcing the law, you know, the Decency Act, it was going to inhibit freedom of expression on the internet. And the internet is the most democratic of the media, enabling everyone access to have a voice. And they said that if the internet is to be, you know, regulated on, it would result in, it would inhibit freedom of expression. Sorry, guys. So a question is like, not a question for me, a question in the textbook, is how are government bans of indecency on radio and television justified but not on the internet? And Justice John Stevens, the guy who wrote the majority of the Supreme Court's opinion, he called the internet He said that the internet is hardly invasive broadcasting, and that the odds of people encountering pornography on the internet are slim unless they happen to be seeking it. And this is also like another question I have for you guys. He says that the odds of people encountering pornography are slim unless they are seeking it, but I'm just not sure that that's true. I still feel like there needs to be some kind of regulation on the internet. Do you guys agree that the internet should remain a free-for-all? Because my thinking is that children do get curious at about age 10 to 12. They start to get kind of curious and they get on the internet. And I know that a lot of websites usually say you must be 18 years or older to enter, but they get very easily, I mean, they're not stupid. They know how to say that they're older than they actually are. You just put in your birth date and it lets you in. There's no other way to regulate who's actually accessing those websites. So I'm just wondering how you guys feel about internet and regulation. And I'm also kind of wondering about, this question doesn't have a ton to do with this section, but whenever they were saying the impossibility of denying questionable material to children without also restricting freedom of access for adults, that made me wonder, why are adults allowed to access pornography in the first place? Is that something that we really, what is the purpose of that? I'm just wondering if anybody understands why that's a thing. Okay guys, I ran a little over time, but there was a lot to cover and I felt like a lot of what I said was important. So thank you. Bye.